Ever felt pain so excruciating it made you wonder if your body was turning against you? Not the kind that throbs or stings, but the kind that feels like your bones are collapsing in slow motion while your skin stays awake to feel it all. The kind of pain that doesn't ask permission, doesn't wait for a fall or an accident. It just shows up in the dark and dares you to survive. That's how my morning started, and from the first breath, I knew something was deeply, horribly wrong. I woke before the sun cracked the sky. The room was still, the kind of still that feels staged, like silence was trying too hard to keep a secret. But my body wasn't quiet. It screamed with every breath. My ribs felt like they'd folded inward overnight. My chest burned as if someone had set a fire just beneath the skin and left it there to smolder. The sheet stuck to my back from the sweat, and when I tried to peel myself off the mattress, I knew something was deeply off. Pain rolled over me in waves, sharp and punishing, like I had fought a war in my sleep and lost. The moment I sat up, a loud crack popped in my side, and the air punched out of my lungs. My hands instinctively flew to my ribs, but what I felt under my fingers didn't make sense. The skin there was swollen and tight. I pulled up my shirt and froze. Across my chest, stomach, and sides, dark bruises stretched like vines. Fresh, deep, angry. Some were round and small like finger marks. Others looked like I'd taken a blow from something heavy, maybe a belt, maybe a brick. But I had done nothing. I had gone to bed in peace. I dragged myself upright, my bare feet hitting the floor with a dull thud that made my knees buckle. Even the cool clay beneath me felt too sharp, like stepping on broken glass. The whole room tilted, shadows curling at the edges of my vision. My body couldn't carry its own weight. I gripped the edge of the basin for balance, knuckles white, breath ragged. In the mirror, the man staring back looked older, weaker, undone. My eyes were sunken into my face, my lips had turned pale. I looked like someone who had been beaten within an inch of his life and hadn't seen it coming. I cupped my hands and splashed water on my face, hoping the shock would bring me back to center. The chill only made the pain scream louder. The water clung to my skin, and suddenly I felt raw all over, like my nerves had turned inside out. My hands trembled beneath the stream, not just from pain, but from something deeper. A quiet knowing. The kind that lives in your bones before it ever reaches your thoughts. I forced myself to speak. My voice came out hoarse, cracked like old timber. Zainab. Her name barely made it through my dry throat, but I didn't have to call again. She was already standing in the doorway, wrapped in her blue wrapper, arms loose by her sides, eyes soft but unreadable. She didn't rush to me, didn't scream at the sight of my bruises. She just walked forward, slow and sure, like she had known this moment would come. She reached for the cloth hanging from the bedpost and dipped it into the basin. Then she wrung it out and began dabbing it across my forehead, my neck, my shoulder. Her touch was gentle, careful, not out of fear, but memory. Like she'd done this before. The cool fabric moved over my skin, easing the heat but leaving behind more questions than answers. There was no panic in her hands, only quiet precision. I looked up at her, jaw clenched. "I think I need a doctor." She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me with those eyes that always saw more than I wanted them to. Then she spoke, voice low and level. "Let's start with a healer." The way she said it made the air shift, like a judgment had already been passed and everything else was just formality. The healer arrived just after midday, her frame small beneath a wide straw hat that threw shadows across her face. She didn't ask many questions, just looked at my body like it was a map, with old wounds trying to speak. Her fingers traced the bruises without touching them. She closed her eyes and muttered something under her breath. Words I couldn't catch, words not meant for me. She smeared a thick paste of ground roots and ashes along my ribs. It stung, a sharp, peppery burn that sat just beneath the skin. Then she gave Zainab instructions in hushed tones, telling her which teas to brew, which leaves to boil until the bitterness crept into the walls. I watched the two of them move around me like I wasn't there, like I was already halfway gone. That night, the fever returned. It started behind my eyes, spreading across my skull like someone had cracked an egg and let the heat run wild. My teeth chattered from cold, but my skin blazed like open flame. The bedsheet felt like sandpaper. Every time I blinked, I saw colors that didn't exist. Every time I swallowed, I tasted copper and regret. Zainab stayed by my side, always quiet, always present. She wiped the sweat from my chest with a damp cloth, the same way she had in the morning. Her face stayed calm, but her eyes had changed. They didn't look worried. They looked patient. I gripped her wrist once, desperate, shaking. "What's happening to me?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me for a long time, long enough to make me wonder if I'd asked the wrong person. Then she said, "The body keeps what the heart hides." I didn't understand what that meant. Not yet. All I knew was that the pain had a rhythm now. It moved through me like a memory, one I couldn't access. A deep, pulsing ache that came and went in waves. I'd scream in the night, chest rattling like it was full of broken glass. Then I'd wake up drenched in sweat, shaking, too weak to cry. The healer came back 2 more times. She tried herbs, oils, chants. Nothing touched the pain. My legs swelled. My fingers curled on their own. My lips split open. My own body had turned into a stranger that wanted me gone. Zainab never flinched. She helped me walk when my legs buckled, helped me bathe when I couldn't lift my arms, held my weight when I couldn't hold my own bladder. There was no trace of anger in her hands, but there was something else, something quiet and buried, like a song only she could hear. And as the days passed, I stopped asking questions. I stopped fighting the ache. I just laid there, waiting for something to break or confess or end. But the pain didn't want to kill me. It wanted to teach me. And deep down, something in me knew. It had a reason. By the 7th day, word had spread through the village that something strange was happening in our compound. No one said it directly, but I saw it in their eyes. The way neighbors paused when passing the gate, the way children stopped playing when they heard me scream through the walls. They didn't see a man in pain, they saw something being punished. The second healer didn't touch me. She stood in the doorway and stared for a long time. Her eyes scanned my bruised body, the swelling in my hands, the dark patches across my neck and jaw. Then she shook her head and whispered something to Zainab before leaving. I never heard her footsteps, just the door clicking shut behind her like a judgment. Zainab didn't tell me what the woman said. She just wiped my lips with warm cloth and helped me sip bitter tea through a straw. Her movements were careful, tender, almost ritual-like. But the silence between us had grown teeth. It sat heavy in the room, watching us both, feeding off what wasn't being said. At night I couldn't sleep. The pain would rise around midnight, sharp and timed, as if something outside of me was clocking in for a shift. I'd shake and whimper. My gums bled, my legs cramped until I couldn't walk. Once, I screamed so loud my voice cracked open. Zainab didn't flinch. She just held the bowl under my chin when I vomited and wiped my mouth without a word. On the 9th night, I heard voices outside the window, 2 women speaking in hushed tones just past the banana trees. I recognized one, our neighbor Mummy Esther. Her voice was always too loud when she gossiped in the market, but tonight it sounded reverent, like a prayer. Sometimes, she said, the spirit comes back not for the body, but for balance. I didn't know what she meant, but her words crawled into my chest and settled there. For the first time since this began, fear came not from the pain, but from the idea that maybe this wasn't random. Maybe something was coming for me. I wanted to ask Zainab if I wronged anyone, wanted to say the words sitting at the edge of my throat. What did I do to deserve this? But something in her eyes stopped me. It wasn't fear, it wasn't even anger. It was something quieter, something that looked like Confirmation. Like she had known this moment would come, like she'd counted the days. I didn't speak, I didn't push, because deep down, maybe I already knew. Maybe I wasn't ready to hear it said out loud, not from her lips, not while she held a bowl of herbs in one hand and my crumbling body in the other. That night I had a dream, or maybe it was a memory. A loud voice, a sharp sound, something breaking. A name shouted, a slap echoing through a small room. Then silence, then blood. I woke up gasping, clutching my own chest as if trying to keep something inside from breaking loose. My whole body pulsed with heat, but a chill ran through my bones. I no longer believed this was illness. This wasn't fever. It was a reckoning, and it had only just begun. The memory didn't come all at once. It came in pieces, out of order, like someone shaking a photo album over fire and letting the pages fall where they may. For a long time, I refused to look back. Not because I couldn't remember, but because I didn't want to. I had buried those moments deep, wrapped them in excuses and shoved them into the dark corners of my mind where accountability couldn't reach. If I admitted what I did, I'd have to admit what that made me. And I wasn't ready to say it, not even to myself. So I convinced myself it was just yelling. Just bad days. Just stress. But the pain didn't care about the lies I told myself. It came to collect anyway. First came the sound, not of her voice but of mine, loud, sharp, ugly, the kind of voice that echoes in rooms long after the shouting stops. I heard myself say her name, not with love, but like it was a warning. Zainab. I remembered the way she flinched when I said it like that. Back then I told myself she was being dramatic. Sensitive, I convinced myself that raised voices weren't violence if hands stayed down. But that was a lie, because then came the image, the kitchen dimly lit, the stew bubbling over. She was holding a cracked spoon in one hand, trying to stir with the other while holding her wrapper up with her elbow. Her hair was tied up, but strands had fallen over her face. She looked tired, rushed, beautiful. But I didn't see that then. I saw failure. I don't even remember what she said that made me snap. Something about needing more time, or forgetting the salt, or asking me to wait. What I do remember, clearer than any prayer I've ever said, is the sound of my palm meeting her cheek. The wet, sharp slap that stopped time. The way her head jerked to the side, and the silence that followed, heavier than a scream, deeper than guilt. She didn't fall, she didn't speak, she just touched her face and stood still, like someone trying to decide whether this was a nightmare or real life. And me? I walked out, not in shame, not in regret. I walked out because I didn't want to face the sight of her pain, because I had convinced myself it was her fault for pushing me, because I was weak and didn't want to look in the mirror and see the man I was becoming. But it didn't stop there. One slap became two, then more. Not every day, not even every week, but often enough that she stopped raising her voice around me, often enough that she learned how to cry quietly, often enough that she kept a scarf near the door to cover the bruises when visitors came by. And each time I told myself I would stop. Each time I held her afterward and whispered hollow apologies. You make me angry. I didn't mean it. I was just tired. It's not who I am. Lies, all of it. Lies I handed her like flowers, hoping she'd use them to bury the truth. And she stayed. She stayed through every season, through every cracked rib and broken silence. She cooked for me, cared for me, smiled in front of guests, cleaned up the blood I caused and never left a trace. And now, years later, with my body splitting open for no reason, with bruises blooming across my skin like rotten fruit, I understood. This pain. It was hers, the ache in my ribs, the fire in my back, the trembling in my knees, the way sleep offered no comfort, the way silence grew teeth. It wasn't illness, it wasn't madness, it was memory made flesh. It was her story playing out on my body, and I was finally being forced to live in it. The morning after the memory came back, I couldn't lift myself out of bed. My legs had stopped responding, and my fingers were stiff like wood left out in the rain. I lay there staring at the ceiling, blinking back tears, not from pain this time, but from the weight of what I remembered. It pressed down on my chest like a second body, a version of me I couldn't silence anymore. Zainab walked in like she always did, carrying a small bowl of pepper leaf soup. Her eyes scanned my body the way a nurse might scan a dying patient, checking for signs of change, for signs of giving up. She placed the bowl on the stool beside the bed, then reached for the cloth. That same cloth. The one she used every morning now, damp with cool water and something I didn't deserve. Her hand moved across my forehead, slow and measured, and I wanted to scream. Not from the fever pulsing in my temples, not from the fire in my bones, but because her touch didn't tremble. How could she touch me with steady hands? After everything? Zainab, I whispered, but my voice broke halfway through her name. She didn't pause, just kept wiping the sweat from my face, like my shame was nothing new. I remember, I said. My throat was raw, like the truth had scratched its way up from the inside. She didn't stop, didn't gasp, didn't cry, just kept tending to me like she was tending a garden in drought. I see it all now, I said again. The pain, the bruises, the silence. You should have left. She finally looked at me, not with softness, not with anger, with something much colder, acceptance, the kind that comes after the storm, when there's no more cleanup to be done, only living with what's left behind. I did leave, she said quietly. Every time I forgave you, I left a part of myself behind. Her words sliced deeper than any blade. My chest shook as I tried to sit up, to reach for her hand, to say something that could undo even a fraction of what I'd done. But my body refused. My hands wouldn't move. My legs remained lifeless. All I had left was my breath, and even that came in broken pieces. She adjusted the blanket over my shoulders and stood to leave. At the door, she turned her head slightly. "You're not dying," she said. "You're just finally feeling it." And then she walked out. I lay there, a man folded in on himself, trapped in a body that was now telling the story I tried to bury. Every bruise a chapter, every ache a memory, every scream a sentence I had earned. This wasn't justice, this was debt collection. And my only witness was the woman I turned into my caretaker. That's how I became a fraction of the man I once was, because I was never whole to begin with. For years I wore strength like armor, but it was only fear polished to shine. I buried the truth under excuses, shoved it into the corners of my mind where accountability couldn't reach. Because if I admitted what I did, I'd have to admit what that made me. And I wasn't ready, so I lied. To her, to myself, to the silence. But the body has its own memory, and when it comes back to collect, it doesn't knock. My body is a living confession, one that wakes me at dawn, pins me to the mattress, and forces me to taste the salt of my own fear. I wanted to be strong. Instead, I am kept alive by the very woman I broke. Each cool cloth she presses to my skin, a quiet reminder that mercy demands more from the healer than the one who caused the wound. If you're listening, if your temper has ever curled in your fist, know this. The pain you deliver does not disappear. It waits. It grows teeth in the dark and learns your name. When it finds you, it will not ask for permission or give you clean exits. It will knock the breath from your lungs exactly as you once did to someone smaller, softer, trusting. A raised hand always circles back. The arc may be long, but the landing is precise. I breathe now only because Zainab allows it, and each breath is edged with shame. I cannot rewrite what I did, but I can drag this lesson into the light. Kindness is the only strength that doesn't rot from the inside out. If you still have the choice, use it. Lay down the anger, or one day you will lie beneath it, a dead man walking long before the grave closes in.